My name's Caleb. I'm 22, and I grew up in what I like to call the golden child household. My parents adored my younger brother, Mason, like he was some kind of royalty, while I was more or less treated like the family handyman. We weren't poor. My dad's an accountant, my mom works in real estate, but you'd never know it by how differently they treated us. Mason always got the best of everything. New clothes every season, the latest gaming consoles, even private sports lessons. Meanwhile, I got whatever was left over, or worse, got told to make do. I always thought that if I just worked hard, kept my head down, and didn't cause trouble, they'd eventually see me as an equal. Spoiler, they didn't. Every family dinner turned into some lecture about how I wasn't pulling my weight, or how Mason had so much potential compared to me. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that once I turned 18, I'd carve my own path. And for a while, I really did. I got a part-time job while going to college, paid for my own phone, and even bought a beat-up used car with my own savings. I thought I was finally earning their respect. Then came Mason's 18th birthday, the day that ripped away whatever hope I had that things would ever change. My parents threw him a massive backyard party, the kind they never bothered to throw for me. There was a rented tent, balloons, even a cake from that expensive bakery downtown. I came home from work halfway through, sweaty and exhausted from a double shift, but I put on a smile and joined in. Everyone was gathered around when Dad pulled Mason aside with a huge grin. "Close your eyes," he said, dangling something shiny. When Mason opened his eyes, he was holding a set of car keys. My parents had bought him a brand new car, a shiny, red sedan sitting in the driveway with a bow on top. Everyone cheered. Mason looked like he'd just won the lottery, and Dad clapped him on the back saying, "You've earned this." I tried to stay calm, telling myself maybe they had something for me too, some little sign that they were proud of me. When it was my turn to get a gift, Mom handed me a box. I opened it and felt my stomach drop. It was filled with cleaning supplies, sponges, a broom, a bottle of multipurpose cleaner. Mom smirked and said, "Now you can start pulling your weight around here." Mason laughed so hard he nearly dropped his new car keys. The guests chuckled awkwardly, and someone even said, "That's practical, I guess." My face was burning, but I forced a small smile. "Thanks," I said quietly, though inside I felt something snap. That night, I lay awake in my room, staring at the ceiling while Mason revved his new car outside just to show off. I kept replaying the moment over and over in my head. The look on Mom's face, the way Dad beamed with pride at Mason, the sound of their laughter at my expense. It wasn't just about the car. It was about years of being treated like an afterthought. By midnight, I'd made up my mind. I packed a duffel bag with my clothes, grabbed a small lockbox of cash I'd been saving from work, and slipped out the front door. I didn't leave a note. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "When are you coming back?" No apology. No explanation. Just the assumption that I'd eventually crawl back like always. I stared at the screen for a long time before putting my phone on silent. For the first time in my life, I felt a strange sense of calm. But I also knew this was just the beginning. I didn't go far at first, just crashed on a friend's couch for a few nights while I figured out my next move. My friend Alex was the kind of guy who could make even the worst situations feel manageable. When I showed up at his door with my duffel bag, he didn't ask questions. He just handed me a blanket and said, "Guest room's yours. We'll talk in the morning." For a few days, I felt like I could breathe again. I picked up extra shifts at work, started saving even more aggressively, and stayed busy enough not to think about home. But my parents weren't about to let me have peace for long. On the fourth day, I woke up to a flood of texts from Mom. "Where are you? You can't just leave like that. We have chores that need doing. Mason's been swamped with schoolwork, and you're putting all the burden on us. Your brother needs the car for practice, but now he has to clean the garage himself? Unbelievable." I almost laughed. They were really upset because Mason had to clean the garage once, the same garage I'd been expected to clean every month since I was 13. When I didn't respond, the texts kept coming, turning from guilt trips to passive-aggressive jabs. "I guess you don't care about this family. Running away solves nothing. You're acting like a child." Dad finally called me that night. His tone was calm at first, like he was trying to be reasonable. "Caleb, you've made your point. You were upset. We get it. Now come home. Mason's birthday week isn't the time for drama." I took a slow breath, staring at the wall. "This isn't about drama, Dad. It's about how you treat me. You bought Mason a car and gave me cleaning supplies. You humiliated me in front of everyone. There was a pause, then Dad sighed. You're overreacting. We just thought it would be funny. And besides, Mason has worked really hard. I've worked hard too. I snapped before I could stop myself. I've been paying my own bills since I was 17, working double shifts just to stay afloat. But you only ever praise him. You don't see me. Dad's voice went cold. If you want to be treated like an adult, then act like one. Adults don't run away when they don't get what they want. The conversation ended with me hanging up. My hands were shaking, but for once, I didn't feel guilty. A few days later, I got a picture from Mason. He was standing next to his new car, flashing a thumbs up, with the caption, "You should have stayed. Just washed it, looks amazing." It felt like a slap in the face. 2 weeks passed, and the silence from me must have gotten to them, because Mom finally showed up at my work. I was wiping down tables when she walked in, arms crossed, that tight-lipped smile on her face. "Caleb," she said, loud enough for my coworkers to hear. "This has gone on long enough. You're embarrassing us. People are asking why you aren't home." I put the rag down slowly. "I'm not coming home." Her smile dropped. "Excuse me. I'm done being the family doormat," I said, my voice steady even though my chest was pounding. "I'm not going back just so you can keep treating me like a second-class citizen." Her nostrils flared. "We've given you everything, Caleb. A roof over your head, food, clothes." I actually laughed at that. "You gave Mason everything. You gave me the bare minimum and expected me to be grateful for it. I'm done." She didn't yell, but her voice turned icy. "Fine, but don't come crawling back when you realize the world is a lot harsher without us." Then she turned and walked out, leaving me standing there with every eye in the restaurant on me. That night, Alex and I sat on the balcony drinking cheap soda while I tried to make sense of everything. "You know," Alex said, "maybe this is what you needed. A clean break. Build your own life." I nodded slowly, but deep down, something sharper was forming. I wasn't just going to build my own life. I was going to make it so good, so undeniably successful, that they'd regret ever laughing at me with that box of cleaning supplies. And soon, they'd get their first taste of just how serious I was. 2 weeks later, just when I thought the storm was finally dying down, I got blindsided. It was a Friday afternoon, and I had just clocked out of work, exhausted but feeling good because I had managed to pick up enough shifts to cover rent for the next month. I grabbed my phone and saw a string of new notifications, texts, missed calls, and one voicemail from my bank. My stomach dropped. When I called back, the woman on the line sounded apologetic but firm. "Hi, Caleb. We just wanted to confirm you authorized the $1,200 withdrawal from your savings account this morning." I felt my throat tighten. "What withdrawal? I didn't authorize anything." After a pause, she said, "It was done in person. The person had your account number and matching ID." Matching ID. I knew instantly who it was. I drove straight to the bank, my hands gripping the wheels so hard they hurt. The teller confirmed it. Someone had come in with my old spare debit card, the one I kept in my desk drawer, and used a photocopy of my license to access my savings. The security footage showed Mason. I sat there, staring at the grainy, still image of my brother smiling at the teller like it was just another errand. "What did he say it was for?" I asked. The teller hesitated. "He said you told him to take it out for a family emergency." My chest burned. A family emergency. I didn't go home that night. Not to Alex's, not anywhere. I just sat in my car at an empty gas station parking lot until almost 2 a.m., trying to wrap my head around it. Mason hadn't just taken my money. He had pretended to be me. And my parents had clearly helped him. There was no way he had a copy of my license without their involvement. When I finally turned my phone back on, there were new messages waiting for me. From Mom. "We used some of your savings to pay Mason's insurance and registration. You weren't using it anyway." From Dad. "Be grateful we didn't touch the rest. This is what family does. We help each other out." I couldn't breathe. "Be grateful?" I typed and deleted half a dozen replies before finally sending. "That money was for school. You had no right." Mom responded almost immediately. "Don't be dramatic. You're living rent-free with friends, aren't you? Stop acting like a victim. Mason needs that car to get to practice." That was the moment something inside me truly broke. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was theft, dressed up as family helping family. They didn't just see me as less important. They saw me as a resource to be used whenever they pleased. The next morning, Mason sent me a selfie with his car, this time with a brand new set of custom rims. "Thanks, bro," the caption read, followed by 3 laughing emojis. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. There it was, the final confirmation that they didn't take me seriously, that they thought they could keep crossing lines without consequences. I didn't reply. Instead, I started researching how to freeze my account, change my banking information, and make sure not a single cent of mine could ever be touched without my permission again. But as much as I tried to stay calm and rational, I couldn't shake the image of Mason walking into the bank with my ID, grinning as he drained my savings like it was nothing. That image played on a loop in my head, fueling something new: resolve. I wasn't just going to cut them off. I was going to make sure they understood what it felt like to be powerless, to have something important taken away from you, and to know there was nothing you could do to get it back. And for the first time, I started to think not just about leaving them behind, but about revenge. After the bank incident, everything felt heavier: my shifts at work, my mornings, even simple conversations with Alex. I had enough money left to keep myself afloat, but watching my savings disappear overnight cut deeper than I expected. That money was my safety net, my one step toward independence, and now it was gone because my parents and brother decided Mason's new rims were more important than my future. I started running on fumes. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling of Alex's guest room, doing mental math over and over, wondering how I was going to keep up with tuition next semester. Every time I'd start to drift off, I'd see Mason's smug selfie again, those 3 laughing emojis flashing like neon signs in my brain. At work, I was quieter. My manager even pulled me aside one night. "You doing okay, man? You look tired." I forced a small smile and lied. "Just a lot going on." The truth was, I felt like I was sinking. My parents weren't just ignoring me anymore. They were actively making my life harder. I got a notice from my health insurance company saying my coverage was suspended because the primary policyholder hadn't paid the premium. Turns out my dad had removed me from the family plan without warning. When I called him, his response was cold. "You wanted to be independent, so pay for your own insurance. Adults do that." I didn't argue. I just stared at my phone for a long time after the call ended, feeling my chest tighten until it almost hurt. That weekend, I went back to my childhood home for the first time since leaving. Not to talk, just to get my stuff. Alex came with me, mostly for backup, and we drove there in silence. When we pulled up, Mason's car was front and center in the driveway, gleaming like a trophy. I walked past it without a word, but I couldn't stop my jaw from tightening when I saw the shiny new rims. Mom met us at the door, arms crossed. "So you finally decided to show your face." I didn't answer. I went straight to my room and started packing everything I owned into boxes: clothes, books, a few keepsakes. Mason leaned in the doorway, munching on a bag of chips, grinning. "Relax, bro," he said. "It's not like we stole all your money. You should have seen Dad. He argued with the bank about them charging a fee. Total win." I didn't even look at him. "Get out of my room." He laughed. "You can't kick me out. This is still my house." Alex stepped forward then, his voice low but sharp. He said, "Get out." Mason muttered something under his breath and left, but the smirk on his face stayed burned in my mind. By the time I was done, my room looked empty, almost foreign. Mom stood at the bottom of the stairs as I carried out the last box. "You're making a big mistake, Caleb," she said, shaking her head. "Family is all you have in this world." I stopped just long enough to meet her eyes. "Then maybe I'd rather have nothing." The words hung in the air for a long moment before I turned and walked out. That night, back at Alex's place, we stacked the boxes in the corner of the room, and I sat on the floor staring at them. It hit me all at once. This was it. There was no going back now. I had burned my last bridge. But in the quiet of that night, something shifted. I stopped thinking about what I had lost, the money, the safety net, even the family I wished I had, and started thinking about what I could build. I opened my laptop and began applying for better jobs. I searched for scholarships, grants, anything that could help me finish school without relying on my parents. I even started watching videos on budgeting and personal finance, scribbling notes in a worn notebook Alex gave me. For the first time, my anger wasn't just an open wound. It was fuel. I didn't want to just escape my family's control. I wanted to become someone they couldn't ignore. Someone whose success would make them realize, too late, that they had thrown away the best thing they had. I wasn't there yet. I was still broke, still sleeping in a borrowed room, still figuring out how to rebuild from nothing. But in that moment, I made myself a promise. One day, I'd make them regret ever handing me that box of cleaning supplies. The first few months after leaving home were brutal, but slowly, things started to shift. I landed a better job at a local logistics company after a manager saw my work ethic at the restaurant and offered to recommend me. It paid more than minimum wage, and the hours were consistent enough that I could finally breathe a little. I moved from Alex's guest room into a tiny studio apartment, barely bigger than my old bedroom, but it was mine. No one could barge in without knocking, no one could tell me what to do with my space, and no one could touch my money. I kept my head down, saved aggressively, and took every extra shift I could. At night, when I wasn't working, I was learning. Budgeting, investing, basic car maintenance, things I'd never had the chance to really focus on before. My notebook filled with plans and goals. I even got into online freelancing, taking on small projects to bring in extra cash. And bit by bit, I started to feel like I was in control of my life. Months passed, and while I didn't hear much from my parents, the few times they did text me were telling. From Mom, "You still haven't come home? Mason could really use your help around the house." From Dad, "We're disappointed, Caleb. You're letting pride ruin this family." I didn't reply. Then one evening, after a particularly long shift, I got a message from an old professor. He told me about a scholarship I qualified for and urged me to apply. I stayed up all night writing the essay, and when I got the acceptance email 2 weeks later, I nearly shouted out loud in my apartment. The scholarship covered almost all of my tuition. For the first time since leaving home, I felt free. With my savings growing and school covered, I allowed myself one small splurge, a used car. Nothing fancy, but it ran well, and it was mine. The day I drove it home, I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before getting out, just smiling to myself. That night, Mason texted me out of the blue. "Saw you got a car. Finally catching up, huh?" I ignored him, but deep down, I knew he was keeping tabs on me, and that my progress bothered him more than he'd ever admit. A few months later, I got promoted at work. The logistics company recognized my reliability and gave me a supervisor role. It wasn't glamorous, but it meant better pay, better hours, and more respect. I could feel the distance between me and my family growing, not just emotionally, but financially, professionally, even mentally. The Caleb they used to control, the one they could guilt, manipulate, or drain whenever it suited them, was gone. But then, just as things were finally starting to look stable, they reached out again. This time with something bigger than guilt trips or demands for chores. Mom called me one evening. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to know what she could possibly want after so long. "Caleb," she said, her voice sugary sweet. "We were thinking of having a family dinner next weekend. It's been too long. Mason would love to see you." I hesitated. "What's the catch?" "There's no catch," she insisted. "We just miss you." But I could hear something in her tone, that faint edge of calculation I'd grown up with. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about dinner. I hung up with a polite, non-committal answer, but my mind was already racing. They wanted something. They always did. And for the first time, instead of dreading it, I found myself almost looking forward to finding out what game they were playing. Because now, I had something I'd never had before: leverage. The family dinner was set for Saturday evening, and though every part of me wanted to ignore it, curiosity won. I needed to know what they were planning. I arrived early enough to watch from the street for a minute before going in. Mason's car was in the driveway, now with even more upgrades: tinted windows, a flashy new spoiler, and a vanity plate that literally said MVP. I almost laughed out loud. When I finally knocked, Mom opened the door like we were best friends. "Caleb," she said brightly, pulling me into a hug that felt rehearsed. "Look at you. You've been working out." I hadn't, really, but I could tell she was laying it on thick. Dad came over and clapped me on the back. "Son, good to see you." We sat down to dinner, and for a while, they pretended everything was normal. Mason bragged about his car mods, his weekend trips with friends, and some new internship Dad had helped him land. I listened quietly, focusing on my plate, until I noticed Dad exchanging a look with Mom. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "So, Caleb, we wanted to talk to you about something important." I set my fork down slowly. I figured. He leaned forward, folding his hands like he was about to offer me a business deal. "We're in a bit of a financial bind right now. Your mom's real estate commissions have been down this quarter, And there's an upcoming payment for Mason's school and car insurance. We thought, since you're doing well for yourself now, you could pitch in. I stared at him, stunned. You want me to pay for Mason's car? Mom jumped in quickly. Not all of it. Just a few months of coverage until things settle down. You know how important that car is for him. He's got practices, interviews. I laughed. I actually laughed at the table, and the sound made Mason glare at me. So let me get this straight, I said. You stole from me to pay for his insurance once. And now you're asking me to willingly do it again. Dad's face hardened. This isn't about the past. This is about helping the family. Something in me clicked in that moment. Not anger, not hurt, but clarity. They hadn't changed. They weren't going to change. And here they were, practically handing me the perfect setup. I smiled calmly. I'll think about it, I said, my tone deliberately even. Mom's face softened with relief. We knew you'd come around. But as I drove away that night, I wasn't thinking about helping them. I was thinking about every late night I'd worked, every lecture I'd sat through about how I wasn't doing enough, every time they'd chosen Mason over me. And I realized something important. I finally had the power to choose how this played out. I had a stable job, a growing savings account, and a level of independence they couldn't touch. I knew people now, co-workers, professors, friends, who respected me, who saw my value without conditions. If my parents wanted my help, they were going to have to see me differently. They were going to have to understand what it felt like to need me. So, over the next few weeks, I started to plan. Quietly, carefully. I looked into exactly how much debt they might be in. You'd be surprised what you can find when you know which public records to check. I learned that my parents had refinanced the house recently, pulling equity to cover Mason's car purchase and other expenses. They were stretched thin. I also started working extra hours again, not because I needed to, but because I had a very specific goal now: to build a financial cushion big enough to ensure that whatever move I made next, I wouldn't have to hold back. And the more I learned, the clearer my plan became. I wasn't just going to say no to their request. I was going to make sure they felt the weight of every single choice they had made. I didn't rush it. The beauty of revenge, I realized, is in the patience. Over the next few months, I made myself scarce. I responded to my parents' texts with vague, polite answers. Nothing they could accuse me of being rude about, but nothing that committed me to helping them either. Meanwhile, I kept building my war chest. My savings grew steadily, and I even picked up a side gig doing remote work for a small tech startup that paid surprisingly well. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just staying afloat. I was ahead. Then, one afternoon, I got a voicemail from Mom that sounded different. Her voice was tighter, strained. Caleb, we really need to talk. It's important. Please call us back. I didn't call right away. Instead, I waited a day, then texted, I'm free this weekend. Dinner. When I arrived, the atmosphere was different from the last time. Gone was the smugness, the forced cheerfulness. Dad looked tired, Mom was fidgeting, and Mason, for once, wasn't smirking. We're behind on payments, Dad admitted after a long pause. The bank is threatening to repossess Mason's car if we can't make up what we owe. I let out a low whistle, as though I were just another sympathetic bystander. That's rough. Mom leaned forward, her tone desperate now. Caleb, if you could just help us get through this month, we'd pay you back as soon as we can. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I smiled slowly, calmly, like I was weighing it over. I could help, I said carefully, but it would have to be on my terms. Dad narrowed his eyes. What terms? I leaned back in my chair, taking my time. I want everything in writing. Every dollar I give you, I want a signed agreement that it's a loan. With interest. I'm not just handing money over to be used and forgotten again. Mason bristled. That's ridiculous. We're family. I turned to him and said evenly, family doesn't empty your bank account without asking. Family doesn't laugh while you're humiliated in front of guests. So either we do this my way, or I walk out that door and you can figure it out yourselves. The room went dead silent. Finally, Dad exhaled slowly. Fine. We'll do it your way. Over the next few days, I drafted a proper contract. Nothing over the top. Just a legally binding agreement that spelled out exactly how much I was lending them and the timeline for repayment. I even had a lawyer friend look it over. When I brought it back for them to sign, I made sure to meet their eyes as they each put pen to paper. The power shift was palpable. For once, I wasn't the one being lectured, guilt-tripped, or manipulated. I was in control. When the transfer was done, Mason muttered something about me being dramatic, but he didn't look nearly as confident as he had months ago when he was grinning at me from the bank's security footage. And I wasn't done yet. Because as soon as I walked out of their house, I called a cousin who I knew was always looking for work and offered to connect him with an opening at my company. If he got hired, and I knew he would, he'd be making more than Mason within 6 months. Not because I needed to win, but because I wanted my parents to have a front row seat to what happens when you bet on the wrong horse. And the best part? I still hadn't cashed the check I was going to use to cover their payment. If they missed even one installment of the repayment plan, I had a perfectly legal route to escalate. One that would force them to confront, in black and white, just how far they had pushed me away. As I drove home that night, I realized something. Revenge didn't have to be loud. It didn't have to be explosive. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is quiet, controlled, and undeniable, the kind that leaves no doubt in anyone's mind about who really holds the power now. And my parents were just starting to realize it. The first month passed, and to my surprise, they made the payment on time. For a brief moment, I wondered if maybe this experience would actually teach them something, that they'd finally treat me with the respect I'd been asking for my whole life. But by the second month, the payments came late. By the third, they stopped altogether. I didn't even get a text this time, just silence, as if they thought ignoring me would make me back down. So I followed through. I sent them a formal letter, attaching a copy of the contract they'd signed. I gave them a 14-day grace period to make the payment, or I'd pursue legal action. It wasn't a bluff. I had the contract, the proof of transfer, and a lawyer willing to back me up. The response came 2 days later in the form of a furious call from Dad. You would really drag your own family to court over money? I stayed calm. It's not just money. It's respect. You signed an agreement. You don't get to pick and choose when it matters. He sputtered, cursed under his breath, and hung up on me. But a week later, the payment came through, along with the late fee I'd added per the contract terms. Word started spreading through the family after that. My aunt called me one evening, whispering, "I heard you made your parents sign a loan agreement? Is that true?" "Yep," I said without hesitation. There was a pause, then a chuckle. "Good for you." Someone needed to stand up to them. Mason, on the other hand, didn't take it so well. He showed up at my apartment one night, pounding on the door until I opened it. "You've ruined everything," he shouted. "Do you know how embarrassed I am having to tell my friends my car's barely being paid off?" I crossed my arms. "Good. Maybe you'll learn what it feels like when someone else's decisions control your life." His face went red, but he didn't say another word. He just stormed off, slamming the stairwell door hard enough to rattle the frame. By the time the final payment came through, my savings were higher than they'd ever been. I had finished school, earned another promotion at work, and was in the process of moving into a better apartment in a nicer part of town. I decided to return the favor. I invited my parents and Mason to my new place, not as a peace offering, but as closure. When they walked in, their eyes widened. Floor-to-ceiling windows, city view, sleek furniture, everything I had built without them. Mom tried to smile. "Wow, you've done well for yourself." I met her gaze and nodded. "I have." Dad cleared his throat. "So, does this mean things can go back to normal?" I laughed quietly. "No, it means I don't need you anymore." Then I turned to Mason, who looked like he wanted to sink into the floor, and said calmly, "Congratulations on the car. Hope it was worth it." I walked them to the door, opened it, and stepped aside. "Thanks for coming. We're done here." Mom hesitated, as if she wanted to say something, but I just held her gaze until she finally stepped out into the hall. When the door clicked shut behind them, the apartment was silent, but not empty. It felt full. Full of everything I'd built, everything I'd fought for, everything they thought I'd never have without them. I poured myself a glass of water, sat on the couch, and let out a slow breath. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was proving anything to anyone. I had won, and I knew they finally understood it, too.